I thought it was incredibly insightful and brought an extraordinary relevance to the works.
We're all negotiating this strange, paradoxical world every time we get dressed in the morning.
The autonomy of the audience and the performance and the whole experience was really real and raw.
You guys didn't take a risk on not only on theatre itself, but you took a risk by having young people come in and create a theatrical work.
I'd actually seen Canberra Youth Theatre at work, and the way in which they primarily work is through a form of improvisation in which the students or the participants have a voice. Why were you excited by the idea?
I was excited because it's a very conceptual exhibition. So basically the concept of Bear came out of finding every work in our collection that in any way referenced a sense of undressing. That kind of explication as drama was just perfect.
It's not a traditional theatre piece, so we needed to make sure everybody was on board with that, and they were really up for it. They're like, yeah, I remember that day we had the paper out and they're like, we wrote down things we want.
We could do,
and we want to include, and they want to be challenged, and they wanted to be bold and brave.
So we began the process of the collaboration, and we came up with the idea of actually beginning with a workshop led by you as the curator of the exhibition. How did that change your thinking, actually having to prepare a workshop for these young actors to understand the work they were going to look at and to open up ways in which they could respond? Did that have any kind of connection with the way you ended up curating?
It was crucial to how the show came together. So what I did with the actors, there is about 12 young actors, I gave them examples of pairs of works from the show. What happened was they would say things like, naked is accidental and nude is planned. And looking at something like the Barbara Blackman as a nude model, they were saying, well, no, she's naked. When she's painted, she'll be nude. But at the moment, she's still naked. And so someone is dressed when they're clothed to the point that they have to be for whatever they're going to do. Those strange sort of calibrations in our minds that are that instinctive reaction and then trying to nail down what it is that we're reacting to was crucial. And so particularly when we got to those more difficult questions of sort of exposure and confidence and vulnerability and that strange kind of shifting ground. So when we looked at portraits like the David Walsh, some of them felt like he sort of had this nerdy innocence and they almost felt sorry for him because he looked so uncomfortable.
I don't think we'd showed our guys all of the images, and some of them you put up that got amazing reactions, like, ugh, oh my God, yuck, why? Ugh. And it was really interesting pulling apart why we had those reactions to those pieces, why they were really extroverted, or was it because we were prudes or introverted in our responses to that? So that really kicked off our sort of process from then on in terms of how we dealt with the paintings and how we dealt with the ideas, I think, behind them and our responses to them.
Children will admire you for being comfortable in your own skin.
Because there was so much in each portrait, they conveyed so many ideas, so many juxtapositions of form, of personality, of emotion. We couldn't really kind of see, how we could represent them. So we really realised that from that moment that we'd take a different approach and have our own response. What is it for us to be in our skin, and how do we feel in our own skin through performance?
Yeah, and identity, really looking at the title itself of the exhibition, Bare Degrees of Undress. What are degrees of undress? What even is that? And played with that quite physically in the space, putting on a lot of clothing, taking off a lot of clothing, and really looking at what their feelings were in that moment and how exposed they felt or how safe they felt according to what was around them.
Or even liberated, different responses to that revealing of the body or, exposure of self. It was really fascinating.
One thing I did with the notes from the workshop was use them as part of a projection that was in the gallery space. As they perform particular parts of the movement in their piece, serendipitously the exactly perfect word would appear behind them. And so you know that two things have gelled.
We were asking our cast to be in their underwear outdoors.
Outside, eating bananas.
That was a difficulty that we put them through, but it added so much to the performance.
I really enjoy the opening scene, I suppose, the what we call beep test, which is kind of a scrambling to find for me what is my identity, what is my skin, using this soundscape that's kind of quite urgent and overpowering and directional. The performers have to find their skin, and then it's about from there unpeeling and revealing even more.
The whole piece was very much informed by the divisive durational work, and we went from really going from sort of like 2 15-minute performances in the gallery to a 1 hour cycle that we took over we spent 4 hours each day, and it was such a physical work and emotionally draining work. There was a moment I remember in one of our pieces in Punchy, and there was one session that we did where a man literally stood in amongst the whole group as they were punching, and Alison and I were sort of worried, fearing for his face as this very physical sort of punching sequence happened. But you know, if there was a small 2-year-old crawling around like at your feet as you were stomping, the stakes were very high in the performance.
And also the consideration of being in the gallery, that the way we structured the piece became very much about the space that we were in and how the flow of people would work.
Yeah, because we went on this journey of feeling comfortable in our skin, and then to feeling like we've overloaded, we're not even in our own skin, and then how do we actually find our own skin? So it did become about identity, and then feeling brave enough to be exactly who we are by the end of the performance. And we had so many comments on that bravery that our audience saw, that these young people, you know, one of them was 16, up to 25, and they were so brave to stand there in their underwear at the end of the performance and say, "This is me, and I'm totally okay with who I am and what you see."
Here it is. Here I am.
What was really interesting too was watching the audience, watching each other, watching the performance, watching the artworks. So it was a very complex kind of dynamic. And some people were really uncomfortable because they don't expect to encounter performance in an art gallery in that way. Other people just revelled in it. And so that was very interesting as well. One woman who actually was here for a conference saw the performers, it was at her lunchtime, followed them into the exhibition and was moved to tears. The idea of exposure of the self and the level of risk and vulnerability that is required to be truly oneself in one's skin, not just to disrobe but to reveal. I think that was the most arresting component of what they did. And I think it was the most enriching component of what they did in relation to the way in which this collection of portraits speaks to us.
That really came to a climax at the end of the performance. They turn around, standing against the title wall, and speak directly to the audience and to each other.
The hardest thing for me right now is to straighten up with my tummy and my back fat and my lumpy nose and my fat lips and this voice. Straighten up and be.
It was incredibly moving, and you could see people's reactions to that, to the extent of, you know, and even when they spoke to each other It was just perfectly balanced, you know, one of them saying to the other, you know, can we please leave now, basically.
Yes.
was really beautifully done, and that really, it made it an incredibly well-rounded and satisfying piece of drama.
I want to walk away and I want to do it again and again and again. Josh, hurry up.
In that sense, for me, it was putting performance and the exhibition together was very powerful for a lot of people.
It also allowed us to connect with a wider community, which was amazing. We had, I think, over 750 people come and see this performance, which was enormous for CYT. We had so many people who accidentally saw us. So they'd come to see the exhibition and then we happened to be there performing. I had a man come up to me one day and say, I've never seen a theatre performance. I didn't know that this is what could be. I've never been really interested in it, but this was amazing. It's given our guys some new training as to what theatre can be, really getting them to think more about the fact that theatre doesn't have to be in a proscenium sort of theatre, it doesn't have to be in a black box theatre, it doesn't have to have stage lighting, it can actually be anywhere. And what does that mean, you know, in terms of the messages we can get out to the community and in terms of the connection we can have with the community?
Really having an openness and kind of taking a risk and saying, yeah, let's give this a go, and seeing the potential of what can be created, because, you know, what can happen can be unthinkable, really. And I think that's what we created, something that we'd never imagined, and it was really powerful.